This weekend, Mordhau is 50% off, and for the next 2 days, Stouty Coaching is 30% off on Metify. Simply use the code APRILRUSH at checkout. With the big Mordhau sale, there's been an influx of new players, so I thought I'd make a settings and controls guide as a lot of the default settings are rubbish. This video is mainly aimed at new players, but it's worth watching for the veterans, as I'm sure some of you have hundreds of hours with head bob still turned on in the game tab. You want to take this to 0 immediately, as it adds unnecessary head movement to your screen, which does you no favours. The other setting you want to tweak here is the crosshair. Change it to melee brackets, no angle and ranged, which gets rid of the annoying compass in the middle of your screen. Next, on the video tab, make sure that your frame rate limit is capped at the very least to match your monitor refresh rate. I've also got the NVIDIA reflex setting turned to enabled plus boost, but frankly I haven't noticed any difference with this. If anyone actually has seen a performance increase with this setting turned on, please let me know, as I'd be quite interested. I play on the highest field of view, and I'd recommend that you do so as well, as it offers more awareness in both first and third person. However, if you get nauseous, then of course lower it to an amount where you feel comfortable. For the graphics, I have everything turned to the highest so that my videos look appealing besides cloth physics, which used to cause some stuttering. I'm not sure if that's still the case, but also the tabbards dancing around can be distracting, so I still keep it off. If you're struggling to reach a high FPS, then dial these settings down. Keep motion blur on 0 to again keep a clearer view of the action. Then click apply and move to the controls tab. For sensitivity, I have this set to 0.8 on both axes with 800 dpi on my mouse. I don't have any particular recommendation here besides not making it too high where a nudge of your mouse sends your camera flying, or too low where you don't hit the turn cap of your swing. If I move my mouse from the furthest left side of my mouse pad to the furthest right, I make about 2.5 rotations of my camera in game, which for me is fine. On this page, you also want to untick mouse x-axis flips attack side and also angle attack after press, which are both 240 directional combat options, which I advise switching away from. The issue with the 240 angle system is that it's fairly inconsistent when it comes to inputting strikes, as moving a few degrees wrong will give you a completely different attack from the one that you intended. So playing with a keybind system where each strike angle is bound to its own key is much simpler to use once memorized. The top players in this game nearly all play with keybinds, and I believe that everyone would benefit from making the switch. This is one of the biggest problems with the default controls, as Tritonians set new players up with an inferior control scheme, which handicaps their development as a player. Even Wizardish, who is by far the best player in North America whilst using 240 directional combat, saw an improvement in his gameplay when he made the switch to keybinds. So in the keybindings tab, the first step you want to do is remove the strike bind from left mouse button by selecting it, then clicking delete on your keyboard. Do the same for the secondary function, as some mice like the Razer Naga seem to receive inputs from gamepad controls. Now, the next suggestion I'm about to make will surely be controversial with some players, but seeing as for the majority of you probably only have a couple of side buttons on your mouse, I think it's a good change worth making for simplicity's sake. So what I recommend doing is deleting your parry bind, then deleting the feint bind, and set the feint or parry bind to right mouse button and click no to the prompt asking if you want to override the other functions. These are spectator functions which you need, so always click no to this. What this change does is that rather than feinting with your keyboard on Q, you feint with right mouse button. If you're in idle state, you still parry with right mouse button as well. This makes timing feints easier, and it doesn't interrupt your footwork because your left hand can stay on WASD rather than straining to hit Q. It also encourages the healthy habit of feinting first, then parrying. If you parry too quickly, then you can get baited by drags and feints. As you can see in this duel, by having some discipline with pressing feint first whilst reading my opponent simultaneously, I was able to outplay him. The only downside to this setting is that if you need to cancel out of an attack into a parry in a rush, it will be a bit slower as you have to double click right mouse button in a hurry. But I personally play with this system, and very rarely do I get hit by that. You also shouldn't be feinting to parry too often anyway, as you lose stam each time you do it. Next, scroll down to right strike. You want to set this to left mouse button, and again click no to the pop-up. The next changes we make will depend on which mouse you have. Let's assume that you have the most bare bones mouse possible, like a Zowie, with no extra buttons. I would recommend putting left strike on thumb mouse button 2, right upper strike on Q, which used to be feint, and then left lower strike on left alt next to spacebar. I no longer recommend flip attack sides to people, as this control scheme involves pressing 2 keys for one attack, which is an extra complication. If you have a mouse like the SteelSeries Rival 300 with a healthy sized DPI key which isn't too difficult to hit with your rear index finger, then I'd recommend changing the DPI keys function in the mouse software to a keyboard bind, one which you wouldn't typically reach for with your left hand, such as square bracket, comma, minus or plus, and not any of the number pad keys which interrupt your sprinting in this game for some reason. Then you can move the left upper strike onto your mouse and possibly even the left lower strike if you're willing to use the mouse wheel click as an input, which is somewhat inconvenient due to potentially misinputting the scroll wheel. If you have a few extra keys like the Logitech G502, then you can move the left strike onto the top of your mouse next to the left mouse button so that you have your two horizontal inputs close to each other, and then your left upper strike to thumb mouse button 2 and left lower strike to the DPI shift key on your thumb. Once again, you'll need to change the function of these in the mouse software to keyboard keys. Once you have every strike angle bound to its own key, click apply. Don't worry about stab angles as these aren't particularly relevant, you can just keep stab when mouse wheel up. Now I also use some ini settings that allow me to hit through players' parry. No, but seriously, there are some console commands that do grant a competitive advantage by making the lighting look significantly clearer. These are r.tonemapperFilm equals 0 and to a lesser extent r.tonemapper.Quality equals 0. I also have r.tonemapper.Sharpen equals 0 to turn off sharpening. This is more of a preference option, so experiment yourself if you prefer it on or off. These settings will reset every time you launch the game, so to keep them on, you need to paste them at the bottom of your engine.ini. Check the description for instructions on how to do this. I hope this guide helped, and if you want more advice, then check out my coaching.